Good evening, Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the last time the Demons started the season 9-0, the Olympics were headed to the MCG. Blues fan Sir Robert Menzies was Prime Minister. Current footy broadcaster Channel 7 began as Melbourne's first TV station. Just Walking in the Rain by Johnny Ray was the number one song. The Ten Commandments was the highest grossing film. The D's had only won 7 flags and would only win 5 more in the next 65 years. Perhaps we'll soon add to that tally as we dare to dream. Joining me tonight as co-host, George. Good evening, George. How are you?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, Bidman. Good evening, listeners. Well, we're 9-0 at the moment, and I'm guessing and predicting that we've blown our chance of getting a priority pick this year.
Yeah, that's pretty true. But you just mentioned the word, the P word, the prediction. And George, I've got a bone to pick with you. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Last week, and I might just play the audio and see if our listeners can pick this up. But George did make a prediction last week that actually did come true. Here we go. Is there a case for Wiedemann, or is Wiedemann just going to have to wait out an injury or poor form to one of those, one of the two bigs, George?
I think our 3 talls at the moment are the resting. Our third tall is the resting Jackson or Gawn. I don't think we need a third player specifically. Like I said, if you have a look at this access all area vision, you can see how well Brown and T-Mac work together. You don't need another third one in there interfering with those sort of really efficient patterns. So when you've got Gawn and Jackson who go down there and provide another threat, that I think that's all that you need. You don't need to overload with an additional tall in there. Wiedemann will have to just wait his chance, wait his opportunity. From week to week, we don't know what will happen. Suddenly, someone gets an injury, and the opportunities will come. Let's hope it doesn't. But a couple of weeks ago, we thought Jack Viney was going to be lasting the whole season. All of a sudden, something happens like that. Somebody breaks a wrist, somebody gets a finger broken, or some other minor ailment. So all that Wiedemann can do is keep kicking goals at Casey.
And there it is, the broken finger. And what happened just hours later? Well, I think the actual injury happened during the game we were actually talking about, the Sydney game. But it was announced that Luke Jackson had finger surgery. So, George, what did you do?
My apologies to Luke Jackson. I will now shut up and not make any further predictions, given my crystal ball is obviously working very well at the moment.
Also joining us tonight, Bin Man. Good evening, Bin Man. How are you?
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. And I reckon George might have been the person who hurt Jacko's fingers. I think he's playing a bit dumb there, suggesting that it was pure random luck. That doesn't strike me as a very likely coincidence. What a great win on the weekend! And Hannibal Inc. had a post that he's watched on Demonland that I was thinking exactly the same thing, that we've watched good teams play ordinary football against us for years, it seems like, for decades, and keep racking up wins, and how exciting it is to follow a team that's doing the same. I just think about all those games where we'd scrap, and I could think of 15 games against the Hawks where we're in it. We worked hard, and you feel like you're sort of, the victory is within touching distance, and the team throws everything at them, and we still come up 4 goals short, and they don't seem to get out of first gear. And it was just sort of, from that perspective, it was a fantastic win, I thought. And the phrase that came to my mind afterwards, directly after the game, was professional win. It was just a professional win. I heard a couple of commentators say clinical.
I heard businesslike.
Businesslike, professional, clinical, and I just think, that's what a good team looks like, isn't it? So, having followed footy for so long and seen, those teams, the Hawks and the Bombers, and, Geelong, and when they're up and about in Adelaide, and even, North Melbourne and the Hawks of the mid-'70s, all of those sides just, won those games, didn't they? The one that, even when they weren't playing their best, they seem to find a way to win, and that's what we're doing right now.
Now, how hung up should I be getting us on us not finishing off, not burying teams? Had we kicked straighter in the last term, I think that very businesslike 26-point margin might have been a little bit higher. 1 goal, 7 behinds in the last quarter could easily have been 3 or 4 more goals, making the 4-goal and a bit victory a 6 or 7 goal win. But I guess, look, if we keep winning, percentage isn't a factor. But I don't know, am I greedy, just wanting a ruthless thrashing?
Short answer, yes. I think we're probably just not used to following a team like this. Bank these wins, don't you? They're a good team. I really rate Carlton, and there were a few comments in the media and on Demonland that downplayed their strength. If people keep talking about the Dogs, and we'll talk about it later, but if our clearance numbers don't sort themselves out, they'll take us to the cleaners, yada yada yada. But they were in that game; they were leading at 3/4 time against the Dogs, and if they had a bit of balance, if Bontempelli hadn't kicked a goal in the shadows of the third quarter siren, they could have easily come out and won that game. They're a solid team, and it was interesting in the call. The 4 or 5 years, 3 or 4 years, they've not lost a match by over 31 points. So maybe I misheard that, but yeah, I rate them quite highly, and I think you are being a bit sort of greedy, perhaps, in the sense that that easily could have been a 6-goal win, but even a 4-goal win's a solid win against a team that's pushing for finals.
So, sorry, what did you say? Who hadn't lost?
Carlton. I think Brian Taylor, and probably I'm making a mistake quoting him, thinking he's accurate, but I think I heard him say during the call that for the last 3 or 4 years they haven't been beaten by any more than 31 points. But perhaps
You might be forgetting the 2018 109-point win we won over them.
I blame maybe 2 or 3 years. Well, that's 3 years ago.
Fair enough. They took it from that game. Well, let's get into it, because we've got a lot to talk about tonight. I try to keep things brief, but we've got a lot to talk about. We're winning, so there's good things to talk about. So we'll start with some individual efforts, and we'll start with the midfielders. But before we talk any of the 3 Cs, I want to praise the double J. James Jordon. I thought he was simply fantastic again this week. We found an absolute diamond in the rough with this kid. He's absolutely flying under the radar of any media attention, but he's fast becoming, such an important cog in this Demon midfield. 20 possessions, 9 contested from only 73% game time. He's had a game high 13 tackles, and it takes him, interestingly enough, I didn't realise this, that he's 3rd in the league for tackles for the year. Additionally, he's contributed a game high 37 pressure acts, and it's also important to note that Jordon has never lost a game in the red and blue. George?
Yeah, he's an absolute ripper, isn't he? 13 tackles from a kid who's, again, 19, 20 at the most. It was interesting this week. He was moved into an inside mid role. So his disposal efficiency drops off a little bit because it gets a bit tighter in getting your kicks out and your possessions out efficiently. But he's got everything. He can play inside mid now, obviously, and outside as well. And to please Binman particularly, he's a great disposer of the ball. It's great to have those sort of players. We've got Salem and Rivers in the back line who seem to be equal sort of with equal sort of capabilities, but to have someone of that capability on the inside now is just a absolute bonus to us. So again, credit to the recruiting people for getting someone like him.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only is he an excellent kick, he's a really terrific decision maker. In the beginning of the game, I reckon it was the first 4 or 5 minutes, he had the ball in the centre, and he had options. He could have gone down the middle or obviously to either flank, and he picked out Gawn on the wing, and it was just a really clever kick because I presume he didn't have anything forward of the ball, and really good vision, but his ability to make decisions under pressure is fantastic, knowing when to get rid of it. And it's a really interesting point that you made, George, about him playing more time in the centre, and I suspect that they used him in there as basically to cover for the role that Viney was playing. And normally he's been this year, they play him in the flanks as an outside player, and his disposal efficiency is normally in the 80 to 90% range, which is elite. That's because he's an excellent kick, but I think the fact that he's playing outside is a big factor. So it's really interesting when you put him in the centre. It's a good reminder of the challenges, I think, of the players like Viney, Track, and Oliver, and when you look at their disposal efficiency stats, it's good to think of the context of how often they're kicking the ball under pressure. I think he was down to 50%, but he had 37 pressure acts, game high 37 pressure acts. I can't recall if you mentioned that, Andy, and that was amazing, really, for a young fella. It's his third season, isn't it?
Yeah, it's his third season in the system, but it's his first year in the season.
Yeah, so he's had 2 full pre-seasons, and he's a smart player, makes good decisions, and I think that was really great for the team that he was able to come in and play that role. And it was obviously a big factor in us. I think changing the centre clearance differential. We won that by 1 this week, and Goody made it a focus in the presser last week that they were going to look at that, and their solution was bringing Jordon in, as I say, to pretty much, I suspect, to play the role that Viney plays, that defensive mid who tackles hard and makes sure that he makes it count every tackle.
If you want to join us tonight for anything we talk about, 03 9016 3666. That's 03 9016 3666. We love hearing from Demonlanders and listeners to the podcast, so give us a call. You can also join us in the chat room, which I've actually just activated. I didn't before the show, but it is open now, demonland.com/podcast. Let's talk Christian Saylor, and I know positionally he's not a midfielder, off the halfback. Love him, but I'm going to talk about him here. Another superb game from Christian, 29 silky possessions, such a great user of the ball. He's really lifted his possession rate this year, and I'll ask you guys in a minute what you think the reason for this is, and I'll roll off some stats. In 2021, he's averaging 27.4. 2018, that was with 20% less game time, so factor that in and say 22. 2019, 22. 2018, 20. 2017, 21. 2016, 18, 2015, 15, and in his first year, 2014, he's had 6 possessions on average. So we've seen a progression each year, but until this year, he's been hovering around the 20 to 22 mark and very rarely hitting the 30 possession mark. So he's averaging 7 or so more possessions a game this year than he usually does, and that's 7 or 8 extra quality possessions. Boys, what's been the impetus for this change? He's getting more possessions. It's not necessarily that he's playing better, but he's getting more of the ball and obviously using it better more times. George, you want to weigh in there first?
I'd only be guessing about this. You really don't know what's going on in the coaching rooms and the way that they're instructing the players to play. But I would think that it's got something to do with the fact that he's got a whole group of players around him that he didn't have in those preceding years. That when you get the Levers and the Mays, who really have only played 12 months together at the best, when they're getting possessions, they need an outlet, and Salem's the perfect outlet for that. Same that we've got in the same way that Ed Langdon's come into the game as one of the outlets, but he's also got Rivers and as well sitting on the other flank, who's doing a great job as well. So the defenders haven't got to concentrate just purely on Christian Salem. I think it's be fair to say that the opposition know that he is a critical component to the way we move the ball up the ground. When you've only got one of them to shut down, as we had in the past, it was easy to do. But now that he's got plenty of compatriots in crime, he's been let off the leash a little bit more, and it's only to our advantage. So, but he is just elite. When people would talk about re-signing the Olivers and the Petracas and the Gorns, I'd put Salem up there in that group as well, because he is so fundamental to the success of the club at the moment.
Yeah, so some similar thoughts. Um, Definitely, obviously, you've got a stronger back line, so it's spread. You've got May, Lever, who are just two of the premier big defenders in the league at the moment. I think a big factor is Hunt and the way they play. Hunt and Rivers, both a defensive and offensive threat. The way they play, they both run and carry, but they work hard back, and they cover a lot of ground between the two of them in terms of blocking holes, getting across the tackle, putting pressure racks on, and then, as I say, they're a threat once they run off that half-back line. And I think they've made a conscious. Those two have freed Salem to get further up the ground, and I think that's been a tactical shift to get Salem delivering into the forward 50 more. And I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. He had leading score involvements, or he led the inside 50s, which is super for a fella playing off the halfback flank, and because he's getting further up the ground, he's a much more damaging player this year because his kicking skills really come into their own. Like the kick he put, I forget who he kicked a beautiful kick inside 50. Our third goal. The third goal that we kicked that Hunt gave off to him, beautiful kick to Nibbler, who then kicked it on. So he's much more offensive than he's ever been in his career in terms of being an offensive threat, Salem. And if you notice, almost all of his kicks now go forward. So there's been a big sort of focus on territory and all of those things. But there was a period where, as I said a few weeks back, if he got 30 possessions, 20 of them would be sort of lateral kicks and chips and, not really taking the ball forward. So now not only is he getting higher up the ground, so he's getting in more dangerous positions, his kicks all go forward, and because he hits most targets, he's become really a key part of the way we transition the ball. And when he does hit targets, those targets are more often than not in really dangerous areas. And I think he kicked one to Track that Track immediately moved on from. And the way they link that up, he kicked it 25 metres to Track, who marked in space, it hit him, and then turned and kicked it straight away for 50 metres, and all of a sudden it was inside our 50-metre arc. So he's really critical the way we transition the ball. And the discussion that, I was certainly of the view that we made a mistake not getting Kelly, but I think I'm going to have to change my view on that now because he has, as George just said, he's really gone into the very elite level now. And I would say he's an A-grader, whereas, he always struggled to reach his potential, I thought, until this last the last part of last year and into this season.
Don't you love it when he's interviewed after the game? He always looks like he's just had a nice quiet day at the office and about to go back to work the next day, sort of thing. He's just so relaxed. Other guys look like they've been through the ringer and beaten up, but not him. Yeah. He's a very relaxed character.
And he plays like that too in terms of how cool he is under pressure. And one of the things that he's brilliant at is he's got great kicking technique, and his hand ball drop is very close to his foot. So he can, under pressure, he can squeeze off those kicks that hit a target. And if you can do that, you can reset, you can take a mark, stop, everyone can man up and get in position. So, yeah, he's a really important player. And I think it was Lion when they, on the couch, they had another catnip for D's fans. The first opening 7 or 8 minutes or more, maybe 10 minutes of On the Couch on Monday night was all about the Ds. So if anyone who's got KO or Fox hasn't seen it, I urge you to have a look. And it's terrific because 10 minutes of demon talk. And they ask at the end, well, how would you break Melbourne down? And each of the players had some sort of half-assed answer. And Lyon said, clamp down on Salem. I'm pretty sure it was Lyon, or at least one of them, but I'm pretty sure it was Gary Lyon who said that, he would send an instruction to clamp down on Salem because he's so important to the way we play.
Let's hope none of the opposition are watching that. Let's move on. Clayton Oliver could not have made me happier for Clayton Oliver to display for the Carlton faithful just what they'll be missing out on for the next few years and hopefully beyond. I think a few of them were convinced Clayton would be coming to them, but he's not. So suck eggs. 28 possessions, 18 contested. He's extended his league-leading contested possession count by 16 ahead of Tom Liberatore. 7 clearances, 10 tackles, 10 score involvements, and that brilliant roving goal. I'll also add he's now taken second place in the Coaches' Votes Awards, whatever stock you put in that. But we'll quickly talk about that. We've got 5 players in the top 21. I think the Bulldogs have 2. Brisbane Lions have got 1 in there. Geelong have got 2. Not many teams have more than, I don't think any teams have more than 2 in there, and we've got 5. It's just remarkable. And obviously we've won 9 games, so we're going to have a lot of players in there because would have predominant votes each week. But it's just, that's the it's just remarkable and great to see. Clary, George, or B-Man, you want to take?
No, it was another masterclass, wasn't it? He's another player who's gone to a whole nother level, and that's been the story of our season in the sense that everyone's gone up a level. Everyone's come along, and we've talked enough about the buy-in and all the selflessness. But his defensive pressure is gone up to 3 or 4 levels, and it makes such a difference. The rundown tackle that he applied to Cripps late in the game was something that he wouldn't have been doing. He just didn't do previously. Particularly dead we'd already won the game and it was late. Harms did something similar, but that sort of defensive pressure is incredible for a player who that was definitely an area of weakness for him. So I love it when a player has a weakness in their game and they work to overcome it. Kicking, defensive pressure, those sorts of things. And he's a different player this year. It's like Salem. He's so much more damaging because he's getting depth with his kicks. He's kicking forward all the time. I'd be interested to know if anyone in the chat room has got these stats, but his handball to kick ratio, I suspect, is much more, is sort of gone towards kicking it a lot more than it was, say, last season or even the one before. And I love that goal that he kicked because two things. It came off extended running down the ground to get to that contest. And 2, that's the thing that he really needs to go up to the really elite level, as I was saying last week, to start kicking goals. And, he's a terrible kick for goal, so I'm happy for him to rover pack and kick it from 10 metres out. That's perfect.
Last year we heard the coaches, and it was even emphasised at the general meeting about the need for consistency. And I think Clayton Oliver is the epitome of consistency that now we're seeing across a whole number of players. He's changed his game completely from what it was. Everyone was ecstatic about the number of possessions that he could get. Now his possessions really hurt the opposition. They don't know whether he's going to handball it, kick it, where it's going to go, and he's putting on the defensive tackling that was almost non-existent in his first couple of years of playing. But the good thing is, when Andy was talking about the coaches' votes with 5 demons in there, and again, it's about consistency. There's 5 demons in that. In those votes in the top 21, because all these players are there every week. They're not playing a good game here or a good game there. They're putting in every single week, and Oliver's one of them. Petraka's another. It's not unexpected. The team as a group has lifted, and we're seeing the benefits of it on the premiership ladder at the moment.
Yeah, on the couch segment, one of the things they talked about was the rolling All-Australian team, or Gary Lyons rolling All-Australian team, for what it's worth. And he mentioned, I can't remember the number, but 6 or 7 Melbourne players that are in good shape to make the All-Australian team. Didn't mention May. Yeah, so add May to that list. So you've definitely got Oliver, you've definitely got Gorn. They're locks. Petrarca's a total lock for All-Australian. Steve May, I reckon, has now gone ahead of Andrews. Everyone was talking about Andrews being the All-Australian fullback, but surely it's Steve May with the work he's done on stars of the competition. Even there's talk about Cozzy and T-Mac being All-Australians. That would be quite remarkable for a second-year player to get the small forward role in an All-Australian team. So, yeah, it's incredible, I guess, that talent that's really rising.
B-Man, you asked about the kick to handball ratio. What I'm just quickly pulling up, doing rough things on the fly. In 2017, he was 26% of the time was kicking. 2018 went to like 35, 2019 like 37, and then the last 2 years have been about 45%. So there you go. He is kicking it more.
Terrific. It's like it's the girl with the dragon tattoo there, Andy, the incredible internet and technology skills.
Yes, and using a calculator of that. I just didn't have a pen to write it all down, so I might have been off, so don't write in and say I was 1% off.
And I think the key thing is that so his kicks are going up, but as George says, is they hurt now. Like he does damage with his kicks now, and I think he was the biggest factor in that first half. Some in the write up in the AFL.com site they had McDonald as best player, and for me it was clearly Oliver. He was, it's really influential. I mean, I guess Jordan probably has a case as well, but Oliver was the difference in the first half in terms of his all-round intensity, and I think the other thing that George said that really is important is his consistency, because even he's always been a consistent player, but I think he's consistently getting high numbers of possessions in his career doesn't equate to consistently being a damaging player. And I think that's the difference. He's consistently one of our better players. And then there's games where he gets off the chain, like this game, and he can be the difference. As I say, if he can add a goal or two a game, a goal a game, then he goes up a whole nother level. And you can see the impact of doing so in Langdon's game. Langdon's gone from a really, really good player last year to a really, really good player now who's an offensive threat. He is getting his goal a game, and he's a player who's addressed his kicking weakness absolutely. The kick he hit Nibbler on the chest from the little drilling pass, and also he looked like gun barrel straight with his shot for goal. So he's another player who's gone up a level or two in areas of weakness.
Just quickly on Christian Petrarca, 27 possessions, 16 contested, 8 clearances, 7 score involvements. Not his absolute best game, but certainly another solid contribution on the fantastic season he's putting together. He just always seems to have so much space. I say this every week, just the way that he sort of can bully his way through things, through packs of, a pack of players and get out and just look like he's got so much time. Not a starring performance by any means, but another solid contribution from track.
And just on that, we mark him hard, don't we, now, because of his level?
Well, that's why.
And there was a play that he did, I forget who ended up, I think it was the Fritsch goal, where he got it on the boundary line and just shrugged off a player like he was could have easily been, any other player would have been knocked out of play, let alone, brushed off the tackle, and crossed it into, 45, 50-metre kick to Fritsch, who dropped the mark but then snapped the goal. It was just a beast mode. He does that sort of thing every week, doesn't he?
And it was the same with where Cozzy got a free kick for being too high and Cozzy didn't end up kicking the goal. It was just a passage of play. Track had like 3 players around him and he ended up getting tackled, but the way he bulled through him was able to get a handball out and we ended up having a shot for goal. But it's just fantastic.
D old fart asked.
You do mark him hard.
Sorry, and D old fart asked in the chat room that is he trying to do too much in the last couple of rounds?
Sometimes he's been getting caught a few times. I think I don't have it up now, but I had AFL stats on, and I think he had 3 or 4 free kicks against him, and they were probably 3 dropping the balls because at times I think he is trying to bully his way through, but I think he gets. I'm happy for him to try it a few times and get caught because most of the time it does work. So maybe he's trying to do too much, but for the most part, it's working.
Yeah, and I love his field kicking, more so than his shot for goal, because he really has that skill to kick to advantage. The kick that the first other one, Fritter must say, put him on his Christmas list for this year for sure, because the first goal we got was from a track kick that covered 40, 50 metres and just weighted it beautifully into space, gave the defender no chance of marking it. And as I banged on about, as George notes, that skill of kicking to space and giving the forward the chance to sort of run to it and, keep the space in front of him clear so the defender can't get round him is something that is so many players don't seem to have. They put it on the forward's head, or they drill it too low, or it was just a beautiful bit of footy.
He's a nightmare for the opposition, isn't he? With his strength and his speed and that capability to deliver the ball so well. Clubs might try to tag him. It's a bit like Dustin Martin at his best. You just can't tag him. You just can't do anything about him when he's on song. So he's an absolute delight to watch. And we do mark him too hard. We would have been delighted with a player who would have produced those sort of numbers for us a couple of years ago. But we've got him and Oliver and a couple of others now. It's very pleasant watching.
Yeah, and I sort of found that I wasn't going to include him in the notes. I thought, how can I not? Because he just does some really nice things. And I couldn't not talk about him. Maxi, I think he played a much better game this week. He's still not back to that early season best. He was forced to ruck for a lot longer periods this week, 93% of time on ground this week, which was okay because the Blues only had the one ruckman. But he can't be doing that for weeks on end. So hopefully some relief comes in the form of Jackson in the next few weeks. 44 hit-outs with 16 to advantage, but he only took 3 marks around the ground, and we're sort of accustomed for him taking a lot more. I think a few weeks ago we were praising his 10 contested marks, but he's certainly not doing that at the moment. So I'm waiting for it to get back. Maybe we're marking him too hard as well. Big man?
Yeah, I'm definitely in the camp of suggesting that collectively these fans mark him too hard, because sure, three marks isn't where he's been at. I didn't get to go to this game, so I didn't see what the conditions were like, but it's been wet. I presume it was wet. It rained at halftime apparently, and then perhaps a bit in the third quarter. It was definitely wet against the Swans previous week. So not perfect conditions for a big fella. The other thing that was interesting is he was on RSN this morning. He does the captain's run or something like that every fortnight. And it's a really good interview. It's a 25 minutes extended interview. And he said that he was asked about having the 3 tall forwards in the team. And it said that a real positive for him is that they're taking more of those down the line kicks that he's been taking. So, and he said one that's good for him. He's not getting smashed as often. So he's got a bit of a chop out. So even though he's on the ground for 90+% of the time, it's not always in that sort of contested marking where he's getting thumped in the head. And that's going to affect his numbers in terms of his marking, because he's also not going forward. So he's playing back more, and he's less likely to mark in defence than he is forward probably. So that's a bit of context for those marking numbers. He was, we sorted out the centre clear differential a bit better this week. So I reckon we mark him too hard.
I think he's still probably. He had those 3 very hard games in a row against Nankervis, Goldstein, and Hickey, who are all physical players. They just jump into you for the whole 100 minutes of the game. That really has an effect on anybody's body. So the fact that Max is still on the field, I find quite remarkable after that sort of battering. He was better this week. But I suspect it's because he's just getting over the worst of what he's been through the last couple of weeks. Hopefully he won't have as difficult a task this coming week against Riley O'Brien, who I don't think's got the same. While he's athletic and capable, I don't think he's got that huge monster characteristic that those 3 have. I think we'll see if the conditions are better this week in Adelaide, that we'll see more output from Max than what we have in the last month.
Yeah, and I think, harking back to what I was saying at the top of the show, it's, part of professional wins and a top team that can do what it needs to do to bank the 4 points is your best players don't have to go at full rat power every week, do they? You're still getting your 4 or 5 goal win. So perhaps there's a bit of that element in there. And certainly, as I said, he said it was an advantage to him to have the tools in. I hadn't sort of thought about that aspect before. And I guess also he's probably taking less stoppage throw-ins in the forward half, at least 2, I would have thought.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you make, or that he makes. I didn't think about that, having Brown and Wiedemann up the line, at least contesting for marks. Makes an interesting point. We've got a caller on the line. Good evening. Welcome to the Dreamland podcast. Who am I talking to?
You're talking to Don't Make Me Angry.
Oh, I hope I'm not making you angry.
No, we're not making me angry. I did say that once you get, Andy, there, once you get off the MFCSS membership and join the MFC, that we could be great friends. But, I didn't think we had any danger of losing to Carlton. And the only disappointing part about the Carlton game was the last quarter when we couldn't hit the kill button.
Yeah, I mentioned that. I mentioned that before. It's definitely, and that sort of frustrated me definitely, because we could have banked a bit more percentage, but we've got to bank the wins first.
Yeah, I wasn't worried about percentage, because the percentage is going to be big anyway. Just as long as you win most of your games, it's going to be pretty big. It's going to be, but it just in terms of paying some teams back, over the years of being thumped by everybody. Just I want to repay a few teams, but we just. Well, it's a time to sort of repay them a bit. Teams like Hawthorn, we didn't beat Hawthorn enough, Bywood. That should have been 100 points, because, just Hawthorn and how much I hate them. And Carlton, we just love beating them up. So, but it made Carlton think that they were actually in the game. The Carlton were like, and they're hanging their hat on they haven't been beaten by more than 31 points in the last 2 years. But, hey, they haven't hardly won either. So they've only won 10 games in the last 2 years. So that's not a thing to write, It's a very poor stat for them. And as long as it may continue that they never achieve anything, Carlton.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone else you want to beat this year?
Of course, I just hope the Queen's birthday is a beating. We always want that to be a beating. And I think Collingwood are that bad that they haven't got the ability to put more than 40 points on the board. So it should be a big win, just because if we just kick our average and they kick their average, and that will be a 60-point win just there. So, people saying that Petrarca and Gus didn't play well this week. One had 26 and one had 27 possessions. So Gus did kick one out in the full. He always kicks at least one has one kick out in the full. But those two are very solid. We mark them too hard. 27 and 26 possession games are fairly good games if you really think about it. So they actually impacted more than people think. But we mark them too hard. So they still had very good games, those two.
Just on Brayshaw, and I was going to bring him up a bit later on. I reckon despite his 26 disposals, he did go at 57% disposal efficiency. And I guess that's my big knock on Gus at the moment. I think he kicked more than one on the full this week. The last 2 weeks have been particularly disappointing, I thought, in regards to his disposal. He just needs to find just a bit of better touch with his disposal, I think, and that should sort things out if he can. Boys, any thoughts on Brayshaw from you guys?
Yeah, I think the statistic that you need to look at Brayshaw for this week was his intercepts. He had 12 intercepts, not intercept marks necessarily, but when you've got a person who's stopping the opposition thrusts forward 12 times, that wins your game. So, if his kicking is not the best, let's hope that improves. If it does improve, he will be lethal on the wing. So he's getting used to playing this new role. It'll take a little bit of time. He's not a natural winger like someone like Langdon is, but I think he's going to be very difficult for oppositions to match up on. Just because of the way he plays.
My thoughts exactly. He's leaving aside his disposal when he did carve up a couple, and it's surprising because I always thought when he came in he was an excellent kick off both feet, but it's not proven to be the case. But it's not just George, the sort of the wing position. He's become an important part of our defence. He drops back a lot into the hole, gets back into that back half inside the opposition's forward arc, 50-metre arc a lot, and just not just sort of intercept marks and getting the ball, but disrupts a lot of forward entries. And the oppositions want to avoid the wing that Langdon's on. Often that's the same wing that our bigs are on. So they'll go down the other side because that's what their safer option in some respects. So there was one play where he got it 2 or 3 times in the space of 2 minutes or less, 90 seconds, and put one of them on the full. But that's because they were trying to avoid Langdon on the other wing and our bigs down that side. So he's an important part of the way they've got our all-team defence set up.
Anything else, Don't Make Me Angry, before we move on?
I'll just say that this week is not a danger game against Adelaide. Like every week, everybody keeps on putting up a thread. It's a danger game. And eventually, if you say it enough times, eventually it's going to come true, I guess. But all we got to do is stop Tex Walker, because he scores 40% of their goals. So anybody that scores 40% of their goals, if you stop that one person, that's at least 4 goals. So no danger game this week. Keep rolling on, keep beating, and bring on Adelaide and bring on the doggies. So, and we could say, go D's.
Go D's. Thanks.
Angry.
That was Don't Make Me Angry. Often gets very angry on the site. Have to keep him in line sometimes.
When we play the Cats next time, Andy, I'm hoping Dangerfield plays just for Don't Make Me Angry, so we can say this is a danger game.
That's right. But yeah, we'll talk about the Adelaide game a bit later. But he's right. You stop Tex and you're halfway there. Let's move on to the clearance conundrum again. This still worries me, big man. I know it doesn't worry you as much. This week we evened up the centre clearances from the lopsided tally last week against the Swans. We won centre clearances 12-11. However, around the ground we were less accountable, losing 21-37. Now, a lot of the time the Blues would win the clearance around the ground and their player would look up and there was either a wall of demons ready to pounce on them or there was only our web of defence sort of ahead of them. And as a result of that, the stoppage clearance, that stoppage clearance of 16, a differential of 16 didn't hurt us. But my fear is that we've got games coming up against much better opposition in the Bulldogs and Brisbane who are better equipped to punish us. Now, Big Man, you found some audio for me this week from, I believe it was Bartel on RSN. We'll just quickly play this and then we'll go on. It's only a short clip.
So Melbourne did this really well. So Carlton actually won clearances, but it was such a misleading stat yesterday. I was at that game. I know we're going to go back to it, but I need it for this example. You can win clearances, but it's like inside 50s. You can have inside 50s, and then you can have really good inside 50s. Carlton won clearances yesterday, and they were just jammed on the boot.
That's right. There's a difference between contested clearances and uncontested clearances.
And scores from
contested clearances, if you're just bombing the ball, Jim, and what you're talking about,
dirty ball. So that's
nothing.
So that's what Hawthorn needed to identify. Kangaroos were getting it. And look, Ben Cunnington, knowing his ability and knowing what he...
That's it. They go on to talk about the Hawthorn North game. Look, we've got that pressure going there. Big Man, can you sort of alleviate my fear for some of the upcoming games?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the clearance sort of evangelist. So I'll do my best, Andy, but I fear that I'm not going to be able to talk you down from the ledge.
You will not.
But what I would say is that what press in the presser, the post-match presser, Goody was asked specifically this question: tell us about the that differential with the stoppage clearances, and basically his answer was, paraphrasing, was I could care less. Because they brought us, he made this point that they had an extra at the stoppage and we had an extra back. And he pretty much said that basically they allowed our boys to go to work in Lever in May, and so that's what Bartel was just saying. So we were able to. We had one less player at the stoppage, so of course we're less likely to win the stoppage. I mean, they've got a couple of good mids. They've got Cripps, who's about 7 foot, and they've got the reigning one of Brownlow medalist favourites, just behind track. So, they've got some pretty good players in that around that ball. And Cripps is a terrific clearance. He's a clearance specialist. That's his go-to. That's his one wood. So it's no surprise they won them, but they won them by having an extra at the stoppage, and which is a tactical win for Goodwin, because he made the point in the presser that two different style teams essentially, both with their strengths, which is his point being different sort of focus in the game plan, one being offensive, one being defensive. We might talk about that in a little bit, but by taking a player up and having an extra at the stoppage and allowing us to have an extra back is actually very defensive, because they just kicked to us all day. We had Teagues had 22 intercept marks, but maybe he meant possessions, but I think it was 15 intercept marks. Lever had 5 just by himself. And we talked last week, the Swans tagged Lever and try to reduce his influence. Well, the opposite happened with Carlton. They just played into our hands and brought him into the game, and he was really influential on the game because they kept on kicking it to him. So Goodwin wasn't going to make any tactical changes. That was working perfectly for Melbourne. So again, that conversation about they won the clearances, but it depends what you mean by winning. They kicked it straight to us, and we scored a third of our score. I think we scored 40 points or 38 points from the back half. So over a third of our score was from the back half. They scored 68 points. We scored more, half of their score from our back half than their total score. So it was not an issue. As for the concern about Bulldogs and Lions, well, if they bring an extra, the Dogs won't bring an extra to the stoppage. But if they do, well, Goodwin will respond. And I guess sort of it's each week is a different setup. Each team has different strengths. Each team has things that they want to get the game on their terms. Everyone knows, Goodwin knows, everyone on Demonland knows, everyone in footy knows that the Dogs want to win clearances and they're incredibly attacking from the centre square. Well, of course, Goodwin's going to respond. And it might be that he looks to make sure around the ground and in the centre that we get parity, that we break even in there, and that might be the focus. So he can do that by setting up less aggressively, tagging, someone like a Bailey Smith or, looking, a Liver maybe. So he's not going to run it like he is against Carlton. If they do bring an extra to the stoppage, well, they'll probably match that extra. It's just not an issue. And, I think that it's starting to sort of be discussed a bit more. And Bartel, to his credit, he made that same point during the call, that it said, it doesn't matter what the gap is when they're just kicking it to us. So I don't know if that helps, Andy, but I wouldn't lose too much sleep over it if I was you.
Well, I'm not really losing sleep. I'm waking up in cold sweats occasionally. Why can't we get first access? So why can't we take it out of the centre? Why can't we be clearing it? I know that we're putting on pressure on them when they get the ball, or it's getting, because of that pressure, it's going straight to our defence, and then we're having to work harder to kick goals. But if our defence falls over, or if this is what I'm worried about. This is what keeps me up at night. If we then can't score from there, then we're in a bit of trouble. And coming up against the Bulldogs and Brisbane.
But we did this week. Last week it was a 17-4 differential in centre clearances. This week we won it by 1. So
centre, but
well, around the grounds is normally bread and butter for us. So he wasn't concerned. I think it's overplayed a bit. Where are we on that? Around the grounds, we're probably in the top 3 or 4 in the league in terms of around the ground stoppages. It's the centre square where we've not had the same focus as we had previously. So it's not as if we're down the bottom of the table completely in that stat, and they want to be in middle table, and we won't get such a big differential against the Dog. Mark my words.
All right. We'll revisit this in a few weeks. Hopefully we don't have to be talking about.
You're getting more than 1 week ahead, Andy.
One. This is starting to have Hawthorn arrogance creeping in, and I don't want that. if we win 3 premierships in 4 years, I'm happy to be an insufferable prick. But at the moment, no. Let's take it 1 week at a time. George, do you want to add anything to clearances?
No, I think Bin Man summed it all up. It's I think the important point that he made was that each team's very different. You've got to look at who their major mids and how they approach the ball. You try to limit their influence by whatever means, and it will be very, very different against the Bulldogs. They've got 3 or 4 players, Bontempelli, Liberatore, McRae, and on the outside they run in waves. It'll be a different sort of game than what we saw against Carlton and Sydney. So it'll be interesting to see how the coach responds to that. But certainly with the Bulldogs, if you give them a lot of the ball, they will make full use of it. But I don't think that they'll get as much of the ball as they've been getting in previous weeks when they come up against us.
All right, let's move on to our defence. Before I laud the usual suspects in defence, I want to give praise to a fellow in defence who doesn't get as many accolades as his draft year compatriots. Hold on a second here. Let's say we're going to take another call. Welcome to the podcast. Who am I talking to? Sorry, go again. I had you on mute.
Sorry, this is Bandicoot.
G'day, Bandicoot. How are you going?
Good. Listen, I was just listening a bit about the clearances, and it's interesting that the Tigers in their 3 premiership years were last every year in clearances, yet they won the premiership 3 times. And Hawthorn were also a fairly low rating clearance side as well. So I guess it's not the be-all and end-all, and I think Goodwin has realised that you don't necessarily need to win the clearance to win games.
I wonder where this realisation has come from. I wonder if it, and B-Man, you'll get angry at me for maybe suggesting that Uze has brought some of this intellectual property or his own thoughts to the table, and I'm not giving credit to Goodwin, but I would say that some of that influence has come from Uze as well. Yeah,
I would.
But interesting stats.
I mean, I think I didn't know. I said this a couple of weeks ago. He wasn't the midfield coach at Hawthorn, and
was he an opposition analyst?
Yeah. So, and this morning, Gawn was saying he wakes up in a cold sweat. Uze trying to work out this centre clearance. I think there's a fair bit of tongue in cheek. But I suspect that Bandicoot's point, Goodwin was well aware of the fact that looking back at the last 10 premiership wins, probably 8 of them have been by teams that have been midfield at best for clearances. And it just Axis of Bob, who hopefully we can get on to do the sort of mid-year drill down on some of this stuff, and anyone else who's keen for that conversation when we have the mid-year break. But it makes a distinction between counting stats and stats that, about influential, and that just looking at the clearance differential numbers in of themselves is a counting stat, like George said last week, just like hitouts. I mean, they're sort of in of themselves, they're of no real value. You need to look at them in context of, scores from them, forward entries, times that you've given the ball up to the opposition. There's a whole pressure forward of the contest. So, Teague made a point in his presser that we killed them with pressure post-clearance. We talked about that a few weeks ago. Well, what does post-clearance mean? Teague he was asked that same question that Goodwin was in the presser. And he said, well, the Demons just killed us post-clearance. So we won them and they killed us. 2 men, 3 men to the ball. In of itself, it's not a very helpful stat. It needs to be looked at in context. And, it's really what happens after the clearance that's important, not whether you get the clearance.
Well, that was sort of happening a bit to us. We were getting the clearances. This was a couple of years ago. We were getting clearances and then weren't able to get it out of there, or if we did, it went straight to the opposition. So
I think Bandicoot's point is a good one. Is I don't know that they were last I think they were down the bottom of total clearances, and they make a big distinction now between the two around the ground and the centre clearances. But it's hard work to get the ball clean out of the centre. It's for one, you're not always guaranteed. Max is not always guaranteed of winning the tap out. And then he's got to get hit it to advantage and all of that stuff. So he's not in there by himself. There's another fella who's 6'5" trying to smash into him. So I think that clearly they've looked at what has been successful and then copied that. Which makes a hell of a lot of sense to me.
Anything else, Bandicoot?
Just quickly, I think that something that goes a little bit under the radar is the demographics or the age profile of the side. And everyone all my friends go, well, what happened to Melbourne this year? And I think that one of the simplest things to say is you've had this core group of young players, Petrarca, Oliver, Salem, Viney's not in the side, who have sort of played together 100 or 150 games that are now in sort of their mid-20s. They're no longer 20 or 21. And I think it sometimes get underestimated what that core group of young players can do once they sort of get peak. Now, I don't think they're peaking yet. I think they've, got 2 or 3 more years before they peak. And it's interesting that this weekend's game, the Demons were running around with still the 3rd or 4th youngest average 22 players. Now, previous to that, with Nathan Jones and Melksham in the side, we were sort of, age profile was sort of 25 plus and 100 plus games. But this weekend, we were still the 4th youngest. So I think the improvement in this side over the next 2, 3, 4 or 5 years is, the sky's the limit, because I don't think we're even there yet.
Yeah.
That's such a good point, and that age profile is perfect, and I think that sort of goes to the point that Goodwin made when he first started, that he's not wanting to create a team that can win a grand final. He's wanting to develop a team that can be successful and in contention for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and I think part of that is, a lot of credit must go to Goodwin for his decision to play Cozzy last year, play Rivers last year, play Jackson, getting those young players in last season and with experience. And, they bring an energy, and Jordan's another one who would have got a crack at it last year if it weren't for his injury. And so I think Bandicoot's point's a really good one in terms of that, it's a really good mix of players, a lot of players around that 120 mark. And, it's a good point about them playing together, but also with that youthful energy coming in, all supported by a system that they've bought into and that they can trust each other to play their roles. It's working, isn't it?
It's pretty important.
Right. Thanks, guys. And go D's, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks,
you for
Bandicoot.
calling.
Great call.
All right, that was Bandicoot. I think he's been on Demonland for a long time. Always great to hear from Demonlanders. 03 9016 3666 03 9016 3666, or join us in the chat room. Also at demonland.com/podcast, or if you want to Skype us, Demonland31. Yes, I wanted to take that call because I thought once we get started talking about the defence, he'd be waiting on the line for a while. But I just wanted to talk about Trent Rivers. Whilst Pickett and Jackson get a lot of praise from the wider AFL community, this guy's flying under the radar like Jordan. He's as solid as an addition to the backline as any draftee that we've had in decades, and I've got every faith in him, whether he's flying back with the flight of the ball, diving on the ground to scramble for a loose ball, or sprinting from far away to effect a spoil or chase down an opponent. For the most part, he's an excellent user of the ball, and I can envision a long partnership between Trent and the Melbourne Footy Club. He's got 200-plus gamer written all over him, wonderful pickup. I'm not going to roll off the stats for him because numbers don't always tell the whole story in terms of amounts of possessions, but it's just a vibe with him, to quote the Castle. Love him. George?
We've got these players playing under the radar in the defence. Everybody notices Lever and his intercept marks, and May taking out the best defender. every week, and Salem's magnificent kicking. But I think this week really showed a couple of other players in a really good light. Hibbert as well absolutely destroyed Betts. I think last week Betts had 4 goals to half time. His solitary goal this week only came about after Jayden tried to handball over the top of him and he intercepted that one, but it wasn't because of Hibbert. The other big change I noticed this week was in Hunt. Everybody loves him running up the ground. And Lawboys looks fantastic, but he's become a defender now.
Tackling as well.
Yeah. He's actually a part of this defensive side. He's not run up the ground and kick it up in the air to the forwards and hope they mark it. It's about defending against the player he's on. He had a horrible game in the practice game against Richmond at the start of the year. He's completely changed the way he approaches the defensive role. So very pleased to see him slotting in there. And then, of course, Rivers that we just talked about. And as Bandicoot and Andy just mentioned, we've got 4 players in the side now in their second season, effectively. Rivers, Jordon, Jackson and Pickett. It's nearly a quarter of the side has come in. And that's why one of the other reason for the big leap in it. We've plugged holes that we had 2 years ago in a big way. So it's not just the maturity, but we've got some real talent that's we didn't expect. I certainly wouldn't have expected these players to be having played the first 9 games all together in this season. It's really unusual for players who are that young. But credit to the recruiters and the development side to be able to get these guys in. But gee, they all look like 150, 200 game players.
And all.
And just before you go on, just more on Hibbert, he's really adjusted his game from that running off the half-back game, racking up metres gained. He's playing that more lockdown of a small to medium forward players, whether it was that Dusty the other week, Papley, Betts. He's just doing the real team things, which typifies the whole mantra of what the club's all about, team first, which they've talked about quite a bit. So I'm really loving Hibbert's game at the moment.
That's a great point, Andy, because his role has changed, hasn't it? Because you've now Hunt and Rivers are those 2 players, and I was thinking he would struggle actually to get in with Hunt and Rivers both playing because that was his go, that running hard off the half-back flank, exactly as I say, metres gained, deep kicks with good penetration, but he's really...
And he still does that at times, but yeah.
Just on Hunt, D. Zephyr makes the point that and George, you picked it up about giving him kudos for his defensive game because it definitely has improved. He and small forwards, D. Zephyr makes the point that's true that they haven't hurt us the way they had previously, and I think Hibbert's also in that mix because he's taken at least this week he took bets. Hunt's his stat numbers are a bit sort of by the by because he's he doesn't really rack up that many kicks or possessions, but his defensive work is 100% improved. I agree, George. And there was one particular play that really brought it home. He got back hard and he forced them not to mark it down in the pocket, which it was a really strong defensive effort. The other thing, though, he does, and so does Rivers, is that they cover so much ground fast in the back line, so they shut down space really quickly, and it's really important to allow a Hibbert, for instance, to lock down a player, and the others. For May, if you're going to have players like May, Manning, someone like McKay, who played fantastic, I must say, all game, you need to have players who are then zoning, covering that zone, and those 2 players do it. On Rivers, the thing I really love about him is how competitive he is. He's just a competitor, and I think back, I'm pretty sure it was a Fremantle game, it might have been the Swans loss, one of those 2 losses in Cairns. He was devastated afterwards. I remember there was footage of him by himself and, just sort of inconsolable. And it just struck me as a kid who doesn't want to lose, doesn't like losing, and will do what it takes to, make sure that, we don't if he can. I thought he was fantastic this week. And there was a moment where he gave away a free kick and he looked completely perplexed when the umpire paid it. He was in the moment, and he's got a really good energy about him. He's also aggressive with his running patterns and his kicking. He goes for it. And I think that sort of really important for our transition and our rebounding off the halfback flank. Those two players, Hunt and Rivers, are really developing good synergy between the two.
What are we seeing in the chat room? Has said, will Jeddah ever come back in? And I can't see it at the moment, barring, I don't want to be a George with these predictions, but barring the injuries, I can't see him coming in unless that's the case.
Apparently, he played pretty well at the Casey game this week, but it's really hard to judge in the VFL, depending on opposition. Although Geelong was obviously good quality opposition, but like you, Andy, I can't see a spot for him short of. No, I'm not going to mention injuries.
But yeah, he would have come in the past to play on Betts or something like that. That's the tough player, especially with Betts' age matches well with him. So.
But I think we're getting far more value out of people like Hibbert at the moment, who can shut down the smalls as well as provide that attacking capability. Sadly.
And
it's not a knock on Jeddah. We love him.
No.
Amdam Demon in the chat room, Andy notes this year is sort of also great lessons and learnings about building culture and management and the role Taylor and I guess also Moni back with that as well. But Jets is in that mix because even though he's not playing senior footy at the moment, it's really important to have those sorts of senior players at the club because, off field is really important in terms of how you build a culture. He's particularly for the young Aboriginal players like Cozzy to have, I think he's related to Cozzy, isn't he? So is his uncle. And to have a player with his sort of gravitas in the seconds is really, really important. I was thinking I watched a bit of I listened on the radio and then watched the goal highlights of the Casey game, and they're playing with a similar system as the D's. And, even players like Majak Dor, who is going to struggle to get into the seniors, you'd think. But it's really important to have a team that's strong as a second who can play the same system. So you've got players playing the roles that they would if they went into the seniors. It's an all club culture. And so even though he's not in the seniors, Jets is, still would be the sort of person who would contribute, train hard, and is still a leader at the club, whether he's in the ones or the twos.
Let's move on. Stephen May, I thought, did an excellent job on the inform forward of the competition. He's been regularly kicking bags of goals. McKay, he's kicked 3, but I believe 2 of those might have been gimmies from the umpires. Mm-hmm. May's affected 9 spoils. He's had 5 intercepts, 5 score involvements for 402 metres gained, which I think with his booming kickouts is contributed to that. Another solid game, as you mentioned, Bin Man.
He's a gun, isn't he? I was thinking he looks heavier than he did. Remember when the issue he said that he had with his injury early on was that they wanted him to play more athletically and doing more running, and I think they've wised up and just let him get strong and lock down those big fellas, and he looks unpassable at times, and he's such a good leader down there. He's such a good leader across the club, I think. I love listening to him being interviewed because he's straight as a die, and he's one of the few footballers who doesn't talk in media riddles, and he answers the questions pretty directly, and he plays that way as well. He's straight line. I think his disposal efficiency was mid-90s, albeit not having many kicks, but didn't make any mistakes. He's a rock down there.
Lever as well, another solid intercept defenders game from Jake. 7 spoils, 10 intercepts. George,
and in conjunction with May, it was almost like the dynamic duo down there. Both of them played 100% of the game time, and both of them had 90% disposal efficiency. I mean, for the opposition, that's just frightening numbers that are coming out of the back line, and it shows how strong our back line is. It would have been interesting, the Lever Cunningham competition. Teague said in his press interview that he had Cunningham slated to play on Lever, but he was gone after a minute with an ACL. But that just let Lever off the leash, and he damaged Carlton extensively during the game. But yeah, while these two are playing together, we've now seen the advantage of them playing together as a team, and they've built a structure around them of reliability, not just because of them, but it's brought it out in the other players that this just isn't a two-man operation. This is a 6 or an 8-man operation in defence, and everybody's playing their part brilliantly, and none more so than Jake Lever.
It's interesting how he'd earmarked someone to play on Lever like Sydney did, and you can guess every team's going to do that, or at least attempt to do that now going forward. So we might have to adjust something to
Or
stop.
or it just might be like everybody put someone on Clayton Oliver and
someone
and yeah, they're just chasing their tails at the moment. How many players can you afford to tag in the opposition? If you put someone on Lever, May gets let off the leash, or Hibbert, or one of the other backmen, Salem. You put someone on Oliver, Petraka gets let off the leash. We've suddenly got talent across every line, which is a great position to be in, but it's just a nightmare for opposition coaches trying to quell these players, hoping they don't break out.
The other thing that's interesting, if they do try to shut down Lever, again, going back to Gawn's interview this morning on RSN, he was asked about Harry Petty. And said that he plays a bit differently to Tomlinson, and that he's a Lever wannabe, and that his go is much more marking. He'll go for heaps more marks than Tomlinson ever did, who was happy for Lever and May to do that, and his role was to he was happy to take the big and really just negate that big. But Harry Petty goes for his marks and is an intercept defender. So if they look to, that gives Goodwin some real tactical flexibility, because they will look to target Lever, but you could pretty much then take Lever back to the square and be that play. He could play the goalkeeper role, leaving Harry Petty to play the intercept role. He's got good hands. He's got the mindset to intercept and mark. So I really rate Harry Petty, and I think he brings something that Tomlinson didn't, which is that sort of intercept marking. And yeah, so then you have got another option if they do look to take away Lever's strength. Ideally that doesn't happen, but if it does, I think Harry Petty can definitely pull his weight in intercept marks.
Well, let's talk about Harry Petty for a second. His confidence, my confidence in him is growing each week, and no doubt the more he plays alongside May and Lever to get that gel happening, his confidence will grow, and I'm very happy with him as Tomlinson's replacement. He's had 8 intercepts. You were talking about that. And very often, he was left as that sweeper that any Carlton attack was met with down the field as they looked up. There's one piece of play, if you recall this, it was in the fourth quarter. The ball was coming in. Carlton had a player streaming down on their half-forward flank, running into into an open forward line. He's kicked it up to a loose player, a player who was running in from the 50, going into the goal square. Harry Petty is actually about between wing and half forward flank from where this vision that I've got that I'm looking right in front of me. He's streaming down the ground into the 50 line. The ball's up in the air. He just has eyes on the ball the whole time as Petty's running towards goal with a Carlton player streaming at him, and he takes the mark, an intercept mark, not caring about the player who could have come and made contact with him. It was just absolutely superb. If you go onto Demonland's Facebook page, you'll see that vision. It's just absolutely superb. I really love the guy, and he'll grow in confidence as each week goes on.
They showed that vision, Andy, on the couch, but they showed it from a bit further on, where arguably they pointed out that he pushed up too high, and that's another thing he does. He pushes up much higher than Tomlinson did. So he started that chain started inside their 50-metre arc, and Petty was inside their 50-metre arc when that scoring chain, or their attempted scoring chain, commenced. In our forward line.
He was in our
Yeah,
forward.
he was in our forward 50-metre arc, pushed right up as they do, and you can really see that at the ground. It's much harder on the TV to get a sense of how deep everyone pushes, but he was inside our 50-metre arc and had to get all the way back to track that ball as it went up, and so he'd run.
And it wasn't just a run, he sprinted the whole way. From where my vision is, starts about on the wing, and he just sprints and takes it sort of about, he's just about to take it now, he's about 25, 30 out, but he's sprinted all that way and never took his eyes off the ball.
And I'll bet you Goodwin would have had a laugh in some senses with him, because if he'd given up the goal, the comment would have been, you pushed up too high and you exposed yourself. Your job is to be the goalkeeper, not to be the goal scorer. So, but I think that was part of his motivation to not get a bollocking.
That's true. George, you want to say anything about Petty before I move on to the forward line?
Just briefly that we're going to see him for the rest of the season playing in this role, and I think it's, again, a credit to the coaching staff that have got him into this position, that he was ready to go from the very moment that Tomlinson was forced to leave the role. It's nice to have that sort of backup, but I think we're going to see the best of Petty in the future, because he's only played these couple of games. He's unlike previous years where we've thrown young players into it and they've had to find their own way. When you put someone like Harry Petty in alongside a Lever and a May and a Hibbert in the back line, they've got that experience around them and faith and to know that they've always got a backup. And he'll start to show the real capabilities he's got, particularly in the intercept role over the coming season. He's going to be a fabulous defender for us in coming years as well.
Agreed. Andy, just before we move off the defence, I was just going to say that it was a really interesting game. Two different styles, and they're a very offensive team, so to keep them to 68 points was fantastic. That was a point that Goodwin made. He talked about two teams with different strengths, and what he really meant was two teams with quite opposing game styles. And Teague said earlier in the season that if they score, we'll outscore them, which runs completely contrary to the sort of prevailing wisdom about what works. And I was reflecting on where we've come in terms of that defensive mindset. And if you remember back to 2018, we're very similar to the Blues. This point was made on Demonland a few times, that in some ways we were similar sides. We'd beat teams around us easily, and we'd often win by 40, 50 points. We looked great when we got it out in the open. We're scoring in bursts, and but we really struggled against the better teams. And then halfway through, from about round 12 in 2018, we made quite a significant defensive shift. We instigated that Omac playing that deep point of the triangle role, or the goalkeeper role. We set up deeper in the sense towards our defensive goal, which is a structure we've got in place since. We've obviously built the pillars around that. We've got Lever and May and all of those elements that George mentioned before. But from round 12 to the end of 2018, we conceded the least points for the rest of that season. So from that point on, we were a defensively strong team. So 2019, 2020, we struggled, but we still didn't ever really get opened up, and our scores against was pretty good. A good mate of mine is a D's fan, Greg, shout out to Greg, he was looking at the ladder, and to emphasise the importance of defence, he noted that the ladder at the moment completely reflects, almost bar one team, which is West Coast, from positions 1 to 13, points against. Is if you just did a ladder with points against, it would read almost exactly the same as the ladder as it is. But if you did points for, it's different. It's quite markedly different, and that might be a bit of a statistical coincidence, but it does point to how critical defence is, and that they just struggled they weren't, because we took away their one wood, which is their ability to hurt teams on the scoreboard. But they don't have a defensive system and structure where they could stop us scoring. And that's why there was that funny vibe at the ground, because it just, well, I'm not sure, I wasn't at the ground, but that sort of sense of, it never felt like they were a threat because they couldn't get their offensive game going, which was a problem for them, because unlike the Swans, they didn't have a defensive system strong enough to stop us just sort of regularly getting a goal every 4 or 5 minutes. So I thought from that perspective, it was really interesting, sort of two different philosophies. But it has to be said that defense first philosophy seems to be unquestionably the blueprint for success.
Yeah, agreed. Well, let's move on to the forward line. We'll talk some individual efforts before we go into the nitty-gritty of whether we persist with the three tools in our forward line, particularly with Luke Jackson expected to return to the lineup in a week or two. Let's talk Tom McDonald. Another solid performance from Tom, some strong marking and kicking goals right when we need them, including an absolute beauty this time from the MCC side of the ground where he threaded an absolute needle of a goal. It's just straight as piss, that goal. I brought up some comparison stats last week on the fly in relation to Tom's 2021 and 2020 seasons, but I just wanted to highlight them again now that we're 9 weeks in. He only played 9 games last year. And I know that last year's game time was 20% less, but given Tom's 2020 and the fact that he was either carrying an injury or extra weight, I'm not sure the 2020 stats would have improved with the extra time. Having said that, the turnaround in form this year is back to his 2018 best. 2021 versus 2020 from 9 games, he's had 80 more disposals, 28 more marks, 9 more goals, and I think the most important one from a team perspective is he's had 35 more score involvements this year. So I guess the result of all this is the 9 wins from 9 games versus the 4 wins from 9 games that Tom was involved in. So well done, Tom. And just out of interest, if it matters, his wins last year were against Carlton, Gold Coast, North and Collingwood. Losses were against West Coast, Geelong, Richmond, Port, Bulldogs, all top 8 teams. So we've knocked off 2 of those top 8 teams and hopefully more in the coming weeks. I might play some audio just before we get your thoughts on Tom McDonald. This was Max Gawn on his good mate Tom McDonald.
So, Maxie, you often have a joke about Tom because he's one of the more popular members of the team and all that sort of thing. But I'm really interested, sort of on a serious note, how proud you are of him in what he's been able to do to turn around his form, because it's a lot of it isn't necessarily physical. I mean, he was pretty much down in the dumps and had lost a lot of confidence to become the player he is again this year.
Yeah, he's one of my favourite people in the world, Whitey, and that's probably why I do take the piss out of him a little bit. But his whole mental state's changed this year. So he got obviously told that to go look for somewhere else, and it didn't work out one way or another. But he always knew the door was welcome back if he couldn't. So that was good from the club to let him know that there was always the door open. But he could have just rolled back in and just gone through the motions. But he got himself his own personal trainer, which, to be fair, is the thing to do at the moment. Almost every player has their own PT now over the off season, and got extremely fit and was doing 200s for fun when we were out here in pre-season. He was beating almost everyone by 5 or 6 seconds and could still blow a candle out. He was in phenomenal shape, and he took that straight into the JLT games, and then now he's starting marking. His confidence is sky high, but he's also a leader. He's still taking Sam Wiedemann under his wing. For example, the diet. He's got Sam Wiedemann on the same diet as him, and he's still got Luke Jackson there teaching him everything there is about marking patterns. And yeah, I'm super proud of him. I knew he had this in him, and I knew 2020 was just a little blip. And we've seen players across the whole league that struggled with the hub, and I think Tom openly probably struggled with the hub, but he's come back in some super nick.
Yeah, it's a great insight.
Great insight.
Yeah, good insight. Big man?
Yeah, isn't that fantastic to hear his skipper. I didn't realise that they were such good mates. But everything that Gorney said is spot on. He's obviously worked hard, and he is gone from being an important player structurally that you might have thought at the beginning of the season to really a core part of how we play and our success. I love the mark he took in front of Brown, and Brown was like, senior footballer come through, and the fact that he just drilled that, threaded it from the boundary. He's up and about. He's enthusiastic. It's great to hear that he's a leader off the track. It doesn't surprise me. He speaks really well. He's a smart fella. He's just playing fantastic football, and that's 2 weeks in a row he's been very influential in big games. I think that the talk about him being all Australian is not facetious, is it? He's in the frame. He's he is 100% one of the best tall forwards in the AFL at the moment, and it's a remarkable redemption story. And you can only sort of be respectful of both how the club's handled it, but I guess most of all how Tom's refocused, and like it just human nature would have been to not be happy, and he's gone completely the other way, and I think that sets a huge example. I've heard Petrarca talk about the same thing and about how much respect he's earned, and it really is a great message to the Bradkeys and all of the other players at the club, Vandenberg, who maybe is struggling to get in or to keep going, is to really put your head down and keep working, and it can happen for you.
George, anything you want to add?
Just once again, we'll bring up the word culture, and with Tom McDonald, it's the old adage about the harder you work, the luckier you get. In this case, I don't think it's as much luck; it's just sheer hard work, and he's getting the outcomes. And everybody knows this story. Everybody outside the club and everybody inside the club. So you can imagine. If you're 19 or 20 years old or just a recent draftee, and you're looking at this guy and you're going, wow, look, that's what I've got to do to get to this level. It just inspires them. It just puts the right culture around the whole place. When you've got people like that actually showing the way and leading by example, to use another phrase. He's just been fantastic. The other thing that I've been super impressed with, and it's not just about Tom, but the other forwards this week, when they're kicking for goals, the set shots in particular, they're going right through the dead centre. They're not just scraping in against the goalpost. And again, I think we're seeing a dramatic change in the way the club's the team is playing. With the improved kicking skills that Williams has brought to the club. Goals that we used to, Fritsch was probably a good example last year. It was always a 50-50 proposition of when he lined up for goal. But Tommy's kick from the boundary line was absolutely, utterly dead straight. It just did not deviate. And Fritsch is doing similar sorts of things as well. When you look at Jaden Hunt's kick for goal, you looked at A&B's kick for goal, they were all the same. And in previous years, like I said, you'd be going, they might make it, or not much chance from this side, but they just didn't deviate this week. And it's not just the goal kicking, we're seeing it around the ground as well. So Tommy McDonald is a great example to everyone, and maybe he's the reason that everybody's playing so well.
Yeah. Bailey Fritsch didn't get a ton of the ball, but the 3 goals makes up for that. And my yardstick for our forwards is if they're not getting a heap of the ball, then they're either got to be hitting the scoreboard when they do, or being involved in scoring chains, or applying that a ton of pressure in the form of tackles or pressure acts. Bailey's definitely done the former and made up for the quiet week he had last week. But I guess having, and we'll talk about the 3 talls and all that later, but when you've got T-Mac and Brown and Wiedemann in there, a guy like Bailey Fritsch is going to sort of pop up and kick 3 goals, from not a lot of possessions. Great game from Bailey, big man.
Yeah, he's, you're right. Like if you've, forgetting the 3, like if Jackson replaces one of the bigs, say, you've got you need to cover those players. And he's a very dangerous size. He's terrific user of his body. Hard to beat one-on-one in a marking contest. And, do you go big with him? Well, you can't really go too big because how many big defenders does each team have? And you've got to be throwing those resources at Brown and Wiedemann or Jackson and Gawn when he goes back, and Tom McDonald. So, there's probably not too many spare bigs that they can throw on him. And if they put a small player on him, he'll beat them every time in a marking contest. And it makes a massive difference, doesn't it, when Brown, he didn't kick any this week, but T-Mac and Fritsch and Brown, and they're kicking accurately. It just means that you get value for your forward entries. And our scoring ratio from inside 50s has been just fantastic this year. It's better, the best it's been since Goodwin's been in charge. And it makes a big difference when those players are kicking it. As you say, George, that kick from Tom McDonald was the degree of difficulty on that was massive, and it never looked like missing. The goal umpire didn't move, Fritsch has got his radar back. It seems as well.
Nibbler, sort of also passed based on his output. He's only had 11 disposals. He's kicked 2 goals, one from the mark that split the pack, and then he played on and drilled it. He's applied 5 tackles from 27 pressure acts, and it had 8 score involvements. I'll just go through some of our smalls all at once. Spargo maybe squeaks past with 13 disposals, 1 goal, but only 1 tackle from pressure acts. Pickett, always explosive, on the verge of breaking games apart or taking a massive hanger, which no doubt he will take one day. Kicked a beauty dribbler that was always going to be a goal in my book. I was sort of right behind sort of watching that go through. Only 12 possessions, 3 tackles from 31 pressure acts. What did you guys think of Cozzy's honesty when he called the kick for goal touched?
Adam Gilchrist was a great wicket keeper, and everybody respected him for that. And I think that's what Cozzy gained on the weekend: sheer respect. It was obvious it was touched in any case, so he probably saved us all from the ignominy of a long and extended review process. So happy to go with that. Talking about all the others, though. I think this is what we've spoken about before. It's just these guys are doing their job, turning up at the office, do your job, do your role, and the team benefits as a result of it. Spargo just seems to crop up when he needs to. A and B's been doing the same sort of thing, cropping up when needed. Pickett excites everybody beyond belief when he goes anywhere near the ball, and that's great for the club because it'll bring people through the gates. He's just that sort of player. The real concern for me with the forwards is that we only had 7 tackles inside 50 this week. We've spoken about this in previous weeks. Fritsch, Brown and Wiedemann all had 0 tackles inside 50. Spargo had 1 and T-Mac 2.
Yeah, I've got the stats. T-Mac 2, Chandler, Jordan, A and B, Cosby and Spargo 1. Yeah. That's our inside 50 tackles. That was all.
Yeah, compared to what, for example, I think Sydney had 35 or some ridiculous number last week.
And I think Carlton had 20 odd.
Yeah. There needs to be a lot more work done around that area from these guys. As Binman said in the past, you don't expect the talls to be putting in too many tackles, but the rest of them have got to lift the game in terms of their output in these areas. We're very fortunate coming up against Carlton, who don't have a great forward line. They've got Betts and Mackay basically are the ones who've kicked goals for them, so you can get away with it, but you won't get away with it playing the Eagles, for example, or even the Bulldogs with the number of forwards that they seem to have at the moment.
But their forwards tackle, like Kennedy tackles, Darling tackles inside 50. So of course they're not going to, be like Cozzy or A and B, but those bigs still have to tackle. And I reckon if you looked at T-Mac's stats, he got 2, did you say, inside 50? That would be about par for him. He'd be getting 1 or 2 a game. Whereas, I thought Wiedemann, he looks fit. and he looks in great condition. He looks like he's grown into his build, and he looks AFL ready. I was really disappointed he didn't get a tackle inside 50. Brown isn't going to get many. He's just too sort of tall and lanky, and he's a bit slow off the mark, but Wiedemann's not. And for me, I didn't care about Wiedemann not kicking a goal. What I really wanted to see him is get tackles inside 50 and pressure acts. I'm not sure what his pressure acts were. He played all right, but that's my knock on him. That was my knock on him last year. In the game against Casey, he didn't get a tackle at all, let alone inside 50. In the Casey North Melbourne VFL game that was on television. I would have thought a fella who's coming in, playing for his spot in a potential final, in a top 4 team, you'd be busting a gut to tackle someone, wouldn't you? That's why you've got to assume that's why Melksham went out of the side. And so I don't think he's, they don't have to write it on the whiteboard in the change rooms. I think it's a given that anyone who's not bringing the right level of pressure and doing their bit in all-team tackling and pressure isn't going to stay in this side. So, I don't know what that's about with Wiedemann, but that was my major concern. And as I mentioned, is that you can carry some players not tackling inside 50, but you can't have 2 or 3. You just can't.
4 pressure acts.
4 pressure acts compared to Nibbler's. What was that? Mid-20s.
Jordan's 37.
Jordan 37 pressure acts. I mean, really, come on. That's a fella who wants to play finals. It's not good enough.
All right. Well, let's talk the 3 talls. How did you see it working? Do we persist for another week? Surely Jackson comes in for the Bulldogs game if ready, but we've got another game before that. Wiedemann, 5 marks, 13 disposals. Brown, 3 marks, 11 disposals. Neither was overly impressive in the day, both ending the match with a behind each. I think Wiedemann sort of got to contests, brought the ball to ground, didn't take a hell of a lot of marks. What I say, he took 5 marks, but yeah, just want to see him clunk a few more. George, you want to start?
Yeah, he took a few good ones down the line, but my concern with the 3 of them playing in there is the structure itself that works so well when it was T-Mac and Brown, and with Max going in there or Jackson going in there. There were a number of occasions where players were flying against each other. The 3 bigs were flying against each other, and that tells me that they're not running their leading patterns in the right way or not working together. Wiedemann will stay in there because Jackson's not probably not ready this week. But as Binman said, he's got to lift his game in a big way. The pressure for spots on the list are going to be pretty intense this year. You've got to show more than that. You've got to get the tackles. You've got to make the second efforts. But that's always been certainly my criticism of Wiedemann. I still haven't seen those second efforts that you see from people like T-Mac at the moment. He just doesn't stop. So yeah, we'll wait and see. He'll get another week, but he better show something for us this week.
Yeah, it's I checked the weather forecast. It's going to be perfect conditions. I think it's sort of 20 degrees, not much wind. It's in the afternoon, so no dew, obviously. It's they've been the bigs have had some pretty average conditions the last 2 weeks. So this will be the week to show their wares. But I mean, it'll be interesting, won't it? Because Jackson comes back in. Does one of those 2 go out? I don't know. It'll be really curious to see what they do this week if they do bring Jackson.
I don't think Jackson's back this week.
Well, there's talk.
No.
Suggestion. Gorn was suggesting it, implying it this morning. Certainly Viney. But yeah, I'd be interesting to see. You'd think they'd be tempted, even if he was ready, to let him have another week just to rest himself, but to give Wiedemann. Wiedemann's a better ruck option than Brown. I think that's his ace in the pack a bit. Brown doesn't go to the ruck at all, and I think Weeds is not a bad ruck. He was all right in 2019, and I suspect he didn't ruck last year because of his the injury that they talked about post-season. But again, if he's going to be on ball, he's got to be doing those pressure acts and tackling. That's even more the case once you're out of the forward line. Just with those tools, what are you seeing in the chat room? Talk us about the sort of kicking it straighter and not so much the pockets, and there's been a bit of discussion on that in Demonland. It's interesting because it's a change that they've made. It seems to me that they've put in place a whole lot of ways we play that are completely predictable. Like their focus has been on predictable. We go up the same wing all the time. We go through Langdon. We have our two bigs down there. We seem to do lots of repetitive things, and it makes a lot of sense in terms of embedding a system. And one of them is kicking to that pocket, particularly the left pocket as they're going towards the punt road end, for instance, at the G. And I have no question that that's a strategy that that they're going to stick with because it just means that they can. It's predictable what can happen. There's one less option if it goes to ground in the corridor, even 20 metres out, then the opposition can, they've got three options to exit straight up the middle or down either wing. In the pocket, with our bigs, those three talls, or even if it's two talls, we're going to halve 70% of the contest. Mark or halve it. It's either going to hit the ground or get a stoppage, and they want a stoppage. That's our one wood is stoppage in there and repeat entries, and so I think that anyone looking forward, to go into the centre, it's not going to happen. So sort of learn to love the pockets, I reckon.
Yep. All right. So I think the only person we didn't talk about this week, I think there were two. We haven't talked about Langdon. I won't go into it too much. Love his gut running. Said last week I gave him a lot of praise about being the pick of the trade of last year. Love him. The other one, Harms, and is he just a placeholder for Viney?
I wouldn't have thought this week. I think it was interesting Chandler coming in ahead of. I know I've got Captain Jack ahead of Captain Jack Sparrow.
Number 32.
So I'm going to make that nickname stick, thanks to Colin B. Flaubert on Demonland, one of a regular poster, and he suggested I go with that to get my brain working. And so Captain Jack, it was a surprise he didn't come in, I thought, and I wondered afterwards when I heard that Viney might come back in this week, I wonder whether they brought Chandler in, telling him that, you're going to be replaced for Viney, because, it's tough to drop a player after one game, but he was pretty average, wasn't he? Let's face it. So he didn't have any impact on the game. It was all.
Yeah, that brilliant effort to keep the ball in, which resulted in Spargo's goal.
That was about the thing and about it, but that was offset by a couple of bad mistakes. And but I wonder whether they thought, well, here's our opportunity to give this fella who's worked hard in the twos. He's done some good things. He played well early in the season. And did he play in that Footscray? He played in one of those pre-season games. To let him know that he's close to senior selection, that he's doing all the things, reward for effort, but telling him beforehand, look, Jack Viney's coming back this week, so you'll only get the 1 week. Whereas Captain Jack, that would have been a sort of a more difficult message, because maybe Captain Jack comes in and gets 15, 20 possessions, and then you've got a problem. Do you drop him on that? No. So I wonder whether they knew that Viney was back for Adelaide this week, and I hope they do select Viney. I want him having a game under his belt before he goes up against the Dogs, because he's going to be, he's going to be expected to be our key defensive mid, and they'll be asking him to smash into Libba and to smash into the Bailey Smiths, and to, he'll be a big part of their strategy to negate the strength of the Bulldogs midfield, which is phenomenal. It's a brilliant midfield. So I expect him to come back this week and Chandler to go out. So Harms, I think Harms is in Goody's best 22, and I was actually, he didn't have a huge game, but I've been pretty really impressed against the Swans, and less so this week. But again, that's what George has said any number of times. It's about playing your role, and I think he's playing his role.
I thought the remarkable thing about Chandler's stats were the AFL side had negative 2 metres gained. It's got to be some type of record.
We've all had days like that. That's like, well, I feel like I've got 20 negative gain on the meters stat.
It was an interesting selection though, wasn't it? Because Swan's game was cancelled. He's been medical sub in 2 others and hasn't got on the ground, so he effectively hasn't played for 3 weeks. And it was interesting that they selected him in the first place. I would have thought number 32 would have been a preference, just in terms of having a couple of weeks of games and performance under his belt.
Before we go into changes, as we've just started to touch on, I just wanted to talk about crowds, and we obviously know crowds are down across the board on the AFL. And Big Man, I know that you're not too worried about crowds, but I'm looking at from the bottom line perspective, and I thought the crowd of 38,581 for first versus 13th. Was at round 9 in the season is quite disappointing. And I mean, what are the factors? There's COVID, there's this ticketing way, you have to do the ticketing now. Is KO people having access to more people having access to the games in their pocket now? I don't know what it is, it's probably a combination of all of those, but just quickly, to obviously 2020, there were no our game against Carlton, there was no crowd, but 2019, it was a round 16 match, 16th versus 18th, and there were 55,358. Now, that was Carlton's home game at the G, so I don't know if that makes a difference. 2018, round 9 as well, 6th versus 17th, when Carlton were the wooden spooners that year, 44,000. 2017, it was a round 2 game, 6th versus 16th, 46,000. 2017, 47,000. It was round 16, 6th versus 16th. Carlton only had 4 wins so they're still having more people. 2016, 40,000, 9th versus 15th, and 2015, 33,000. That was a round 21 game, 14th versus 17th. So go back to 2015 where we've had less people at a game, but that was late in the year when both teams were pretty much bottom 4.
Can I answer that in 2 parts, Andy?
Sure.
First part's not really an answer. It's more of a hashtag. It completely drives me nuts. It's like at the beginning of the season, everyone's jumping on Melbourne and, with the Freo crowd and, where is everyone up the snow? Hardy, hardy, ha. What sort of crowd is this? And bagging us for the first 2-3 weeks. We were even talking about it on the podcast, what's going on? Don't we show up? It's plays into that pathetic commentary that BT, one of the shocking things of not being able to go to the game live this week was watching it on television instead and having to put up with the infuriating commentary, like insulting. I hope the club makes an official complaint because it was pathetic. They're joking about how quiet we were. It's the same thing that, everyone jumps on us for low crowds. And now that it's a clear pattern and you've got clubs with twice the numbers of members, you've got clubs with 80,000 or 100,000 like Hawthorn, 15,000 people went to the Mother's Day game that the Hawks played. And then you've got Hardwick complaining about playing at the Docklands and saying, well, Tiger fans don't turn up. Give me a spell. And why are those clubs getting shredded? I mean, why?
They've got 100,000 members.
100,000 members. And Carlton have got 60,000 members, haven't they? I mean, they're one of the biggest clubs in the league. So it's not just anyone can go. It's not just the Melbourne fans. And so at the beginning of the season, we get shredded. Our bloody reputation gets trashed and all the jokes about us as a club. And now everyone says exactly what you just said, Danny. Is it KO? Is it COVID? Is it, and so everyone's forgiving the clubs now. What about Richmond fans? I'd be saying, well, they bored with winning. Brian Taylor, if they stop coming because they've won, it's all too easy for them. It just absolutely infuriates me. So that's first part. The second part is, I think that if you look at things like sort of that giving up smoking, they talk about it takes 6 weeks to have new ways of replacing the previous thing and to get new routines. Well, I wonder whether from a sociological perspective, 12 months of change routines and people doing different things on the weekend, getting used to watching the footy on telly, like you said, with the KO. I wonder whether there's been a shift that it's never going to come back. Maybe the crowds will get to a number, but, will increase. But there's still a lot of hesitancy out there in the community about, impact of COVID, and, we're nowhere near through this pandemic. So I think it's way too early days to sort of worry about it, but I suspect, well, it's not too early to worry about, but I suspect it's probably one of those changes, a bit like the work-life balance with people, working 2 days, 1 day at home and in the office. Those sorts of big changes to society is going to float a footy, and footy's never going to get back to those sort of numbers that you were talking about.
I think slightly differently. I think the ticketing is the biggest single factor in this. People aren't worried as much about COVID as what some might suggest. You've only got to look at what's on the trains before and after the games to see that people are just crowding in together. The ticketing is just plain awful. You can't plan to go to a match interstate. You can't even plan to go with your mates on the weekend unless you've got a reserved ticket effectively in one of the higher level of membership. That's just dissuading people from going. It's too difficult. You don't know, for example, if you're looking to try and get a GA ticket, it's 2 days before the game. So you can't say to your mates, "Oh, look, let's meet at the MCG on the weekend." Everybody, in order to do that, somebody's got to organise to put all the ticketing information in one tranche to go in. It's not a case of, you go and get a GA ticket and you go get a GA ticket and we'll all meet up. You can't do that. So people are just staying away from the games because it's just too hard to get into the ground.
I want to go. I want to go to the game in Adelaide this week. I've got to wait till tomorrow to know if I can get a ticket to even get in. And forget me having to now then afterwards get accommodation and a flight, which shouldn't be too difficult. But gone are the days where you can plan this weeks and weeks out. I don't know if I can get into the ground.
Yeah,
because Adelaide have so many reserved seats, the ground could very well be empty, but I can't get a general admission ticket. And, they're going to lose a person who wanted to come from interstate to go to a game.
Yeah. Are we going to be in the same situation when we play the Bulldogs? It's an away game. We won't be able to find out whether we can get a ticket until the Thursday.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
And what's the story? So now I've got my reserve seat back. I've got a ticket that the club printed out for me at the beginning of the year, to the plastic card. I can't even use that. I have to go to the app to do about it. I didn't even know about this until a few days before the game. Lucky I read something on Demonland. I would have turned up to the game with my card and hadn't organised the app and everything. So you have to go into the app. You have to select the game. There's about a 10-step process to get your ticket for the game. It's free and you don't have to buy anything. I don't have to go on Ticketek now, but they've just made it so complicated, and I'm tech savvy enough that I can work it out pretty quickly. But if my dad had turned up to the game not knowing this, he wouldn't have known how to do it. He wouldn't have had the app. He wouldn't have had he doesn't have a username or password for his thing. I know they sent out emails and all that, but not everyone reads them, as Sky clearly didn't. But they've just made it so hard. I guarantee you next year you won't get that plastic ticket anymore. They're going to make you do it through the app now. And I don't understand, what is it? It can't be a contact tracing thing, because you would have that information on the barcode of your ticket.
Another thing on that, Andy, the mate I spoke about before, he's got one of the a set seat, and we can't sit together anymore, because if he doesn't sit in his seat, it doesn't work in another part of the ground. So he can't get a general members, even though he's obviously a general member.
I used to be able to sit where I sit, but I could walk around anywhere around the ground except to get into AFL members or the MCC, but I could walk anywhere else.
That's right. So he sometimes would go and he'd sit in his seat, and he'd come and meet me in the Ponsford or something. So that's all. That's changed generally, but now with this change to the ticketing that you just mentioned, he has to go to that seat in his fixed reserve seat.
And I understand that they're going to have zones and whatever, and for a while we've got to do that, and that's fine. I'll fall in line with that. But this whole I don't know why we have to do it on our mobile phone. It just made it really complicated. And I know that there are some older people who sit behind me. One of them I didn't see there this week, and it's probably because they just didn't know how to do it with the tickets. And if you don't have a smartphone, and most people do, but I'm sure the aging population might not. What do you do then? If you don't have a mobile phone, you can't go to the footy anymore.
Yeah, and really don't underestimate the number of people who are in that position, Andy. So it's just made it very, very difficult and unnecessarily difficult, as you said. What's wrong with the hard plastic tickets that identifies who you are? It's got your name written on it. It's generally got your seat on it. Why do we have to go through this process? But
I guarantee you, when I scan my barcode, it knows that.
Yep.
Andy from Demonland has just entered the ground.
Yeah. Anyhow, we're stuck with it for the moment. Hopefully we get...
Is that what it says on your card, Andy?
It does. Got the red demon.
Mine says Binman, so that's quite a coincidence.
George, I've got sort of the stats, the time on the ground. You want to talk about time on ground and fitness? Do we want to...
Yeah, just go quickly again. It was interesting. We reverted to type again in this game against Carlton. We had Lever and May with 100% ground time, 95% to Petrarca, Gawn, Salem and Langdon all 93%, and Brayshaw 87%. This again showing the level of fitness that we've got in the team at the moment. When you've got midfielders and runners like Petrarca and Salem and Langdon and Gawn playing, 90 plus and 95% of the game, that would have been unheard of years ago. So the advantage is that it, as we've spoken about before, everybody else gets approximately 70%. So that means that they can come off, get breaks. We've got 6 or 7 players taking a heavy load. It's quite remarkable. When you looked at Carlton, for example, they only had 3 players who were more than 90%, and that was after they lost Cunningham in the first quarter. So they weren't spreading their load in the similar sort of way with their critical people, particularly in the midfields and things like that. So our fitness levels are being shown to be a big advantage to us because we can keep these players on the ground, and we've got the people who are capable of staying out there more so than we did in the past.
That's an amazing stat. Did you say Petrarca had 95% game time?
Yeah.
That's incredible for a power. He didn't play that much forward in this game either. And where would he play with Fritsch and the 3 talls up there? I mean, where would you just squeeze him in? So 95% is incredible for a player who is a power player, and he seemed to actually have his best quarter was his last. So he's running through the tape. Keeping that sort of player on the field, I wonder how that compares to, say, Dangerfield or, even a Martin. I suspect, well, Martin probably plays deeper and so does Dangerfield, so maybe they can play more minutes. But it makes a bit of I think that's really interesting context for the debate, which I hope doesn't get any ground, about shortening the quarters to 15 or 18 minutes because, it's just a total overreaction to, the injuries, but who knows what they'll end up being. And we've proven that, if you've got a player like him at round 9 being able to play 95% game time and pretty much maybe 60, 70% of that in the middle, then, it's not an issue.
And it enables, when I said everybody else is getting 70% average sort of game time or a run, what that also means is that they're getting a quarter off the game.
Yeah. What did Jordan
off the ground?
George?
Oh, I'd have to look it up. I haven't got it to hand.
Who did you say?
Jordan.
Well, the rest of the ones that he didn't name were in the 70s, right. And I do have it because I got it in my notes for our discussion on him. 73%
right.
game.
And so that's the point, isn't it? Because then if you get your core players and Olivers and up, I think he's probably was in the 80s normally, but you've got your Hibbards doing 90. Then Jordan, who was asked to play a different role and be in the centre and take the hits and the tackle and the pressure acts, you can give him a chop out. And so 73% is not even 3/4 of game time. So you can make sure that he's got maximum impact when he does come on. And the offsetting that is track stays on the ground and is dangerous for the whole game.
You mentioned Hibberd, but I think Hibberd was coming off every time Eddie Betts needed a
Right.
rest, so he only had 76%
Yeah.
this week. George, you also want to speak kicking accuracy, not just disposal efficiency. We had 9 players 50% or below, including Cozzy, Track, Brayshaw, Hibberd, Brown, Wiedemann and Jordan. Oliver and Max were just above 50, and above 75 were May, who had 100, and then Lever, Fritsch, T-Mac and Rivers.
Yeah. I'd spoke about it before. It was mainly to do with the goal kicking, how accurate that has become, and the improvements that we're seeing there. But around the ground, as well as the general rule, you've got really high levels of kicking efficiency now. We're hitting targets. There was, as Ben Man pointed out, those couple of ones that there was one that Hunt's goal, A and B's first goal, I think, all came from accurate kicks. Disposal efficiency can be if you kick it 5 metres to the left of the guy, and the guy has to run the 5 metres to make the mark, you still get 100% disposal efficiency. But we're hitting the guy on the chest, not giving the opposition the chance to get the mark. So it's just something that I'm seeing in the side. And again, all the credit I think goes to Mark Williams and the techniques and the that he's employed during the pre-season and during training sessions to get this kicking efficiency up. So I think it'll put us in good stead.
I was thinking about that today, actually, George, and you're right. I mean, he's obviously had a fantastic impact. Langdon's specifically said that he's been his key reason that his kicking's improved. But that predictability that I was talking about, and having a clear system and everyone really knowing what their role is, and they showed vision on one of the shows through the week about everyone pointing to where they should be, and so everyone knowing where they are in relation to other players. I wonder whether that helps with disposal efficiency as well, because you can be confident that if you kick to that spot, the player who's supposed to be there will be there. And even ones those over-the-head handballs that all teams seem to be doing, but Hibberd does them in defence. You see them happen all the time. Part of that must be the confidence. Well, our rule is someone sits behind this contest, so I can handball over my head with a high degree of confidence that my teammate will be there. Well, that comes as a clean disposal efficiency. So I wonder whether that's a factor as well, is that predictability, everyone playing their role and doing what they're supposed to be doing is actually supports good disposal efficiency, and particularly as it relates to kicking inside the 50, things like running patterns and leading patterns and all of those things. If everyone knows what the person coming up the field is going to do and vice versa, then you're going to have a greater chance of hitting the target, aren't you?
All right, so let's talk changes. George, who's coming in, who's coming out?
No more predictions from me. If Finey doesn't come up, I don't know whether he will or not. We can only wait and see. That's a medical situation. Binman's number 32 is really putting a lot of pressure on needing to get through to the senior team. He's 30 disposals and 6 tackles again this week. Chandler would have to be pretty doubtful to retain his spot, I would think. Apart from that, I don't see any need for any other changes. I don't think we're going to, like I said, I don't think we're going to see Viney. I don't think we're going to see Jackson, despite what's being said in the media. We'll just go with what we've got at the moment, and that's more than sufficient, I think, for Adelaide.
I think they will. Viney will come back in. I reckon Chandler will go out for Viney. And it'll be really fascinating if Jackson is ready. Then whether they bring him back in, they'll be loath to drop Wiedemann just because psychologically that's going to be a challenge to sort of man management. I think. I don't know where that leaves them. I just don't think you can have all of those players in. I thought there was a chance you could at the beginning of the season, but watching Wiedemann and Brown together, they're just, as I said, they collectively they're not putting enough pressure on. So, but so it'll be fascinating to see if Jackson does. I would probably, if I had to take someone out of that team for Jackson, it would be Wiedemann. First in, last out, or last in, last.
After your first
Yeah,
out.
that's right.
But Big Man, you seem to be picking teams based on not hurting people's feelings.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a factor in terms of that for Woodham. I mean, that's got to be considered. So I think that's all part of the. You want him to also have a good run out at the senior level, but it depends what they've framed it up as, and so it'll be. Yeah, I'll be really. We'll get to know on Thursday night this week, won't we?
Yes, back to Thursday nights and makes it easier for me setting up the Teams thread, knowing exactly when it is. I just forget every week.
And it won't be a squad because it's the Saturday night, so
That's
it will
correct.
be the full list. So just on Jackson, there's no comparison between him and Wiedemann. Jackson plays a completely different role, and one, he's I think a better footballer, but two, the way the tactical, the way they use Gawn and Jackson, there's no way Wiedemann's going to be able to replicate that a little bit because he can do some minutes in the ruck and give Gawn a chop out, but it's really that old school chop out. Whereas Gawn and Jackson have got a really good thing going on in terms of when they decide to do that, and Gawn makes that call often, and he's not going to do that in the same way with Wiedemann. So he's really important, Jackson, to the way we now play our footy. So he's back in as soon as he's fit and ready to go.
What's Adelaide's ruck situation these days? They've got the tall
Riley O'Brien.
But anyone who's there other ruck.
I think they've been using Fogarty as a backup, but I can't be sure about that.
Brandon's had 5 hitouts. He was the other one last week.
Yeah,
5 hitouts.
So O'Brien's 202, but he's very athletic and very capable as a footballer. But their backup ruck's only a backup ruck. It's not like they've got 2 rucks, perhaps, like the Bulldogs that got when they got Steph Martin and English coming up against one. They're both good, solid ruckmen in their own right, but Adelaide's really only got the one in O'Brien, and he's 6 centimetres shorter than Gawn.
Yeah, he's had O'Brien's 15 hitouts to Nick Nat's 31.
Yeah.
Tactics, is it just a matter of us stopping Tex and that should do the trick?
No, they're an interesting team, Adelaide, in terms of the way they play is modelled on Richmond as well, and so very similar to us in the sense that it's a contest first, based on pressure, and so you expect at home they'll bring it. They've been pretty good with their pressure this year, and so I think that if they go in thinking just stop Tex, well, that's a first-class ticket to Louisville, I think. So, and one assumes they won't. They just haven't done that. They've mentally been in the game, except for that first half against North and maybe, part of that Hawthorn game potentially. But, I can't see them taking them easily, and nor should they. If they do go in just thinking shut Tex, they're a good chance of losing. But, they trust our system versus their system. Both 2 pressure teams, so different to last week, where it was 2 distinct game styles, very similar game styles, similar foundations, different styles in terms of defensive structure, but the foundations are the same. Both teams have a focus on pressure. Both teams have focus on the contest, and also territory is important to Adelaide as well. So, but we'll just have too much pressure and they won't be able to score. So I think they'll struggle to score over 50 points against us, and but I hope that Demonland doesn't go into meltdown if we only win by 25 points, because there's a fair chance we will.
The other player we have to stop, and we've done it successfully in the last couple of games that we played against Adelaide, is Lynch on the wing. They feed through him like we've been feeding through Langdon. If you shut down Lynch, you shut down a lot of their supply into the forward line. He's a very good deliverer of the ball. Adelaide's other real concern is their defence. They've got a couple of good players, but they don't have the same defensive structures. For example, against West Coast, Darling kicked 5 goals in 15 minutes. That tells you that there's something. Their structures just don't work in the same way that ours do, certainly. So, yeah, you're right, Bin Man. Don't go there expecting that just shutting down Tex will be the solution. But just as equally, that they won't be able to stop our forwards. I don't think with the three that we got, we'll do the same to them as what West Coast did to them.
Yeah,
I thought Lynch was injured. No, Tom Lynch you're talking about?
Yeah, Tom Lynch. I don't know off the top of my head. No.
I'm looking at their injury list at the moment. Got Tom Lynch toe 7 to 9 weeks.
Oh, right, that's very good news then.
There's one less avenue to goal. So
yeah, exactly.
Out, so that's their best.
That's their best. Yep.
I think Matt Crouch isn't playing. Wayne Malera's out for the season.
And speaking of Tex, if you were going to pick one player in the AFL to go up against Tex and you'd back him to beat him, it's Steve May. Steve May will relish playing him. Man on man. Tex is all about using his body. And his strength. Well, May's strong enough. Tex can push off some of these other fullbacks, but he won't be pushing off Steve May. So we set up our, for a team that's structured around, as Don't Angry said, 40% of their goals come through him. He's unlikely to get more than 2 or 3. McKay's a good comparison. He was terrific, I thought, and so you're going to give up some goals to those sorts of forwards. But if he only gets 2 or 3 goals and they only get 5 or 6 goals collectively, then job done.
All right, boys. We might end things there. Unless you got something else you want to talk about.
Just to wish you luck with your trip to Adelaide, Andy. Don't go too hard.
Well, it depends on whether I get a ticket. If I can't get general admin, I think I'll have to go onto the black market, pay overs and sit with some hardcore.
Go in as
Adelaide
undercover Crows fan.
So no, I can't do that. I'll hold my tongue a little bit, but I may not be doing the podcast next week.
Can you yell out when we do win? Can you give a big scream out, sort of, "Go Redlegs"?
Yes, I will. I will do that. They'll think I'm who's that, Norwood?
Yeah. One final thought about the game. Was it last year there was someone on the replay who kept on yelling out, or was it the year before, who must have been near one of the mics from a camera?
Yeah,
woohoo, man. That's right. I remember you guys talking about it on the podcast.
Yeah, I believe. Didn't someone track that guy down? It was on one of the Facebook groups or something. Yeah, well, listen out for him on TV. I'll try and get near a microphone. I might add my own. All right. Thank you, B-Man. Thank you, George. Thank you to Don't Make Me Angry, and thank you to Bandicoot for calling in. And we'll be back next week. Go Demons.
Go Redlegs.
Come on, Demons. Come on, Demons.